Good morning, everyone, on this fifth Sunday in the Epiphany season. It's always so good to be with you. We only have one more Sunday in the Epiphany. Lent is coming up, as I think you're aware if you look ahead at the calendar. But we almost conclude our Epiphany service with the Gospels for today. I have my notes here, which I don't usually have, but as I find I'm getting older, my memory gets worse and worse. I don't know if any of you have experienced that, but I suspect it's kind of a common phenomenon. What I want to talk to you today briefly about is this statement, which I would like you to think about, and I'll talk a little bit more about it later. And the statement is, no one of us has a permanent place on this earth. Think about it. No one of us has a permanent place on this earth. And I say this a couple Sundays ago. Some of you may remember that I did something that I said that I had never done before, and that was get, I suppose, what some people would call more political in what I was saying. And I may do that today, I hope for the last time, because as a minister of the gospel, I think clergy are tasked to interpret the scriptures and to share what knowledge we have gained through years of education and biblical interpretation, and not I guess, dabble in politics or whatever it's called. But the problem is, as we all know, that religion and politics are invariably linked because, of course, what you believe is going to affect what you do. And in a couple of minutes, I'd like to talk to you about something that some of you may want to tune out because it's kind of philosophical or theological. But first, just in passing, let me say a word about the Beatitudes that have been our gospel lesson last Sunday, this Sunday, and for the next two Sundays. The Beatitudes have kind of been called the Magna Carta of Jesus' teaching. It's in it, Matthew in particular sums up teachings of Jesus that scholars think happened over the course of his life. But Matthew, writing primarily for a Jewish congregation in Jerusalem, wanted to, some scholars think, simulate the Pentateuch, the book of Moses, the first 5 books of the Bible. So Matthew divided the whole story of Jesus up into 5 sections, and the Beatitudes and the teaching are in that first section. And they're kind of a guide to life, and you've heard sermons, and I've heard sermons, and I've read infinite number of articles about what each of the Beatitudes means. So I'm not doing that at all this morning, except to emphasize that this is a place to start. There's only one aside I want to mention. When we say blessed are, scholars tell me that there is no Greek word that is like are. And a better translation is like, happy are those who are meek, or happy are those who are this or that, not blessed. Blessed kind of means happy, but it's in the present tense. Right now, this is happening. Right now. All right. Let me go back to my statement that I opened, that no one of us is a permanent resident on earth. The book of Genesis is very clear that God created us in God's image. And that's the basis, I think, of what I want to say this morning. And a lot of what's going on in our country right now seems to me to fly directly in opposition to all of us being created in the image of God. We are talking about migrants. We're talking about immigrants. We're talking about people who come into this country looking for a better life. And I remind you in a thumbnail sketch that our country was founded a particular group of people, both the Jamestown colony in 1607 and the Plymouth colony in 1620, both of those groups had particular religious biases. And it was assumed for many years that as Northern Europeans, particularly English people came over, that the United States was primarily a white Northern European country. And this lasted about, well, up until the time of the American Revolution. And it wasn't until the 1800s, really, that Southern Europeans, Italians, Spaniards, some Eastern Europeans began to arrive en masse in the United States. And for a period of time, they did wonderful things for the American economy. And I'm not an economist, some of you probably know more about that than I do. But as I read history, all of these immigrants coming in did wonderful things for the country. The country grew, the country prospered because of all these people coming in with all these different talents. But in the year 1924, under President Coolidge, a backlash began to form against people, particularly from Southern and Eastern Europe. And it wasn't economic, it was, to put it bluntly, it was racist. Some people, the people that had been here for years and years, began to fear that, as we hear today, it's coming back, that they are going to be supplanted by all these people coming from all rest of the parts of the world. And there was a reaction against that. And in 1924, Congress passed laws severely restricting immigration. And it began to change the contour of the country. And this lasted all through the Second World War, up until Lyndon Johnson in 1965 passed the Voting Rights Act and the Great Society, the rebuilding of America, and again opened the immigration gates. And that's been going on now until the present administration seems to be wanting to go back to the way it was in 1924. And for me personally, this is a problem. Now, don't mistake what I'm saying. The church and the state are two completely separate entities. The church should not be running the state. Again, as I read history, and perhaps as you do, times in history when the church has run the state, things have not generally worked out very well. Consider Iran at the moment. It's a theocracy. Anytime a theocracy or a government based solely on religion is in power, the economics, the quality of life, the suppression seems to mount, which I think to most of us is not a good thing. But I'm concerned about talking about immigrants now in our midst. And the theology of all this is, as I think I've told you many times, my firm belief as a Christian pastor is we come from God, we're here for a relatively brief period of time, and we return to God. That's kind of the basic creed as I see it. And the place of Jesus in all this is Jesus was an immigrant. Jesus was a migrant. Jesus, remember in our stories, the Epiphany story, early in Epiphany, had to flee because Herod the king was trying to kill him. And we don't know exactly how long he stayed in Egypt, but he came back as an immigrant to his own country and moved from Nazareth up to Capernaum, as we've been talking about, and began his public ministry. And he ultimately concluded his work here on earth by being crucified, in the process, in some way that we will never fully understand, somehow made things right with God. We talk about justification and all these words that are very slippery and mean different things. But somehow we believe as Anglicans that Jesus embodied God. This is the incarnation. And this is pretty theological stuff, and I know it's maybe not the most interesting thing you've ever heard. But I think it's important to realize that in the very first instance, Jesus was a migrant. And God became one of us. God became an immigrant into this life we all live. And that, my friends, to me has profound, profound implications for the way we should treat each other. That we are, as Jesus became in the image of God and became one of us. We are all in the image of God, even though, however we interpret the story of the fall, we sort of got a tarnish for sure in the story of the fall, but it did not take away our primary image of being God within us. And so when we talk about what's going on today, it seems to me we need to keep foremost in our minds this image of migrants as being in the image of God, our neighbors exactly as we are, no matter where they come from, no matter what color their skin is, even no matter probably what they believe. We are all in the image of God, and we are all migrants, a short time on this earth to move on. And it seems to me that to make a very broad statement, it's probably you could poke holes through. There are two general kinds of people that I see in the world. There are the people who are after possessions. They think that life is built on what they can get, material things, what they can assess, and they live a life of possession. There are other people who see themselves as migrants, who see themselves as passing through, who are less committed to things, who realize that the image of God is more fully embodied in a person who gives up, who gives away. And I think the challenge that I personally face, that you personally face, and our country faces now is kind of which kind of person we're going to be. And you read people saying what can be done, what can be done about the polarization in this country. And it seems to me that the first thing that has to be done is people in Christian churches, all Christian churches, and other people who are like-minded, have to band together and say enough is enough of treating people as disposable, as treating people as things, and we need to see the image of God in everyone. And I apply that to myself as much as I think about it for our country. So the theology of immigration is one that the church has preached for years, since the very beginning. The church is very clear that we are of two worlds. And as I've said before, in our baptismal vows, we are called to respect the dignity of every human being. Now, our task is to go out and figure out a way to do that. And that's the job for politicians, and the church is not politics, but ultimately, I believe the church has to be a moral compass to point politicians, economists, sociologists, everybody in the direction of honoring the unique individual humanity of every person. So I think that's what I'm concerned about, and I wrestle with this every day and every week, as I know many of you. But I think the only way that things will change, and I see some signs of this happening in various places, is for those people who can gather together and work as a group. And I see in our bulletins that there's a little bit about the REACH program. You can read it in your bulletins later. people are doing things. People are taking food to people who are afraid to go out shopping. People are giving rides to people who need to go to the doctor, that are afraid if they get out of the house that ICE will somehow question not their only status being here in the United States, but indirectly their status as a human being. Well, let me stop with that, and I invite your comments. I'll be around after the service to discuss or argue with anybody that has we all have different opinions, and I know that, but all I can say from the bottom of my heart is the way I see things from my Christian perspective, that we need to respect the image of God in each one of us. Amen.